North Korea is on the verge of collapse. Kim Yo-jong's bloody power grab has begun and Pyongyang has become a war zone. Right after the Ninth Party Congress in 2026, Kim Yo-jong seized the summit of power and immediately went off the rails. From the outside, she looked unstoppable. But the truth? She had walked straight into a trap. Her brother Kim Jong-un had laid for her a disposable shield designed to protect his daughter Kim Ju-ae's path to succession. And the moment she understood that, she chose the worst possible answer: rebellion. She signed the death warrant of her own closest aide, a woman who had witnessed her darkest secrets and her treasonous schemes, and unleashed a wave of bloody purges across Pyongyang. But there was something she never saw coming. The silver fountain pen she personally used to sign that execution order, the very one she used every day, was already carrying the most lethal secret in the regime. And it was on its way to Seoul. What I'm about to share is the only truth that exposes the deepest fractures at the top of Pyongyang's power. If you want to follow this story to its end, subscribe and hit like right now. Now, let's talk about what was witnessed in Kim Yo-jong's private quarters and the blood-stained pen that escaped Pyongyang's hell. The air that night had a strange kind of cold. The banquet at the Palace of the Sun was lavish, 9-party congresses worth of celebration, but underneath all of it ran a current of suffocating tension. I was one of the few people with unrestricted access to Kim Yo-jong's personal chambers, serving as her senior protocol aide. That privilege, I would learn, had been a noose the whole time. The banquet was winding down when I went back for a document folder I'd left behind. I pushed open the door to her private office and heard voices. Men's voices. The kind that didn't belong there. What I saw through the gap stopped my breath. Stacks of black money squeezed from the people were piled high on the table. She was there, smiling, conducting some kind of exchange with shadowy foreign contacts. Greed written across her face. Then I knocked over a flower pot. A small sound, but she heard everything. The door flew open. Those eyes, cold, sharp, calculating, locked onto mine. No flinch, no surprise. She smiled. Walked toward me slowly. Then, almost gently, she reached out and touched the silver fountain pen clipped to my chest. "Jae-hee," she said softly, "you've seen too much. That's a sickness." That was all she said. Within 30 minutes, state security agents had kicked down the door to my quarters. I was dragged to an underground interrogation room without a word of explanation. Cold concrete. The smell of blood. They called me a spy. Demanded a confession. I screamed that I was innocent. They answered with fists. The door opened again. An officer slid a document across to me. My execution order, immediate. And at the bottom, signed in the silver fountain pen I had polished with my own hands every single morning, was Kim Yo-jong's signature. The woman who had called me Uni and laughed with me just yesterday had personally signed the order to end my life. I was still staring at it, head down, hollow, when every light in the room went out. In the dark, someone covered my mouth and snapped the chains off my wrists. It was Lieutenant Colonel Park, Kim Yo-jong's personal security commander. He pressed something hard into my palm and whispered low, "Take this. It's the pen she used to sign your death warrant. It's the only evidence that can save you. And the only key you'll need." He pulled me to my feet, shoved me into the back of a transport vehicle, and we vanished into darkness. Somewhere in that speeding black, I pressed the blood-stained pen to my chest and made a decision. I would survive, and I would bring the truth of this ruthless regime into the light. The floor of the transport was soaked. Blood, filth. The handcuffs biting into my wrists weren't the worst of it. The worst was not knowing where they were taking me. Every time the vehicle jolted, my body slammed into the corner like cargo. Then I heard a low, heavy detonation somewhere in the distance. Then gunfire, sharp and fast. Something was happening in the heart of Pyongyang. "What is that? Stop the car!" A panicked shout from the driver's seat. The brakes screamed. Outside, chaos. Shouting, screaming, overlapping. In that moment, I pulled out the pen Park had given me and worked it in the dark with just my fingertips. Smooth silver surface. A nearly invisible seam near the tip. I twisted it and something small and hard dropped into my palm. A microchip. Smaller than a fingernail. Everything clicked. This wasn't just an object. This was a bomb. Kim Yo-jong's secret financial networks, her blackmail files, the regime's most lethal vulnerabilities, all compressed into something you could lose between the floorboards. She had thrown me into the fire and without realizing it, handed me the one thing that could burn her down. Her voice came back to me then, like a hallucination through the interrogation room speaker. Uni, when you die, keep your mouth shut. That flat smile underneath the words. My heart detonated. Every moment she'd called me Uni, every shared laugh, every handheld had been theater. The second I was no longer useful, she'd discarded me like trash. Grief curdled into something colder. Tears on my cheeks, but not weakness. A vow. Yo-jong, you're wrong. I'm not dying with my mouth shut. I'm going to live and I'm going to be the evidence that brings your fake kingdom down. The sounds of fighting outside were getting closer. Someone kicked the back door hard. I pushed the chip back into the pen and gripped it. The door swung open. I stared into the light with the eyes of someone who had already died once. The real fight was just beginning. The door tore open with a sound like a scream. Beyond the blinding searchlight, not regular military. Masked armed men, locked in brutal hand-to-hand combat with state security agents. The center of Pyongyang was already burning. Now, go! Someone shouted and I threw myself out of the vehicle. My hands hit the ground and under them, crumpled and half-crushed, was the execution order from the interrogation room. Kim Yo-jong's sharp signature glinted under the moonlight against the red insignia of the Ninth Party Congress. A name I once revered. Now a death stamp from the underworld. I grabbed the paper and stomped it into the dirt. Resignation became fury. Fury became something beyond words, the raw madness of survival. You want me dead? You dare? I didn't even feel the split in my lip. I ran. Grenades detonated behind me. The pressure wave almost knocked me down. Bullets from the security detail's pursuit unit bit into the ground at my heels, each impact slamming my heart against my ribs. I ran through the darkened back alleys along the Taedong River, a rat threading through walls, and felt something inside me break apart permanently. The woman I had been yesterday was gone. What remained was something dragged up from the bottom, teeth bared, ready to tear. At the end of an alley, I ran straight into a young rookie agent. I didn't hesitate. I drove the silver pen into him before he could raise a sound. The sensation traveled up through my wrist, unfamiliar, sickening, but my eyes didn't change. I took his sidearm, felt a chill at what I'd become. But I had to live. I had to survive with enough viciousness to make that signature meaningless. Far in the distance, sirens. Black smoke rolling across the river. I waded into the cold water and hid in the current. The terror had transformed. Somewhere along the way it had become something almost like exhilaration. Kim Yo-jong hadn't signed my execution order. She had signed her own. I smiled in the dark. The gates of hell were opening from the outside now. The Taedong was glacial. But a searchlight sweeping across the surface is colder than any river. I cut through the water with nothing but silence, and then every public address speaker in Pyongyang screamed to life at once. Emergency martial law level 1. Shoot on sight, anti-party element Lee Jae-hee. My name, tearing across the Pyongyang sky. The forest outside the city was already a cage. Military trucks everywhere. Dogs. I collapsed into a ditch, chest heaving, mud soaked. The whole world had gone insane over one person. Me. Every streetlight felt like an informant's eye. My trigger finger had nothing left. And then, cutting through the noise like a blade, I heard Park's last whisper in my memory. Before that transport door opened, he had leaned close and said, "Take the record and the pen to one person only. In the mountains of Jegang province, past the Yamak River, find the hut with the red mark. Ask for the fox." He hadn't saved me out of pity. He had chosen me deliberately as a living courier for intelligence that could crack Kim Yo-jong's power open at the seams. There was nothing left in Pyongyang for me. No shelter. No one waiting. The frozen border to the north, the one they said no one crossed alive, was the only road I had. Find the fox. Jegang province. I stood up on shaking legs. A searchlight swept over my head. I threw myself into the darkest part of the northern forest. Behind me, the broadcast was still calling for my execution. But I wasn't afraid anymore. Those hunting dogs she'd sent after me? They were already becoming wolves pointed back at her. The border was far, but the fury inside me had already crossed the river. Jegang province in winter is a mass grave. The wind there doesn't blow, it flays. I passed bodies frozen mid-stride, people who had simply stopped moving and never started again. The Death March was what survivors called it, and stepping over those frozen forms, I felt the last of my humanity go brittle. I bent over a dead man's clenched hand, searching for corn. A single kernel. Whatever was left. The last of my dignity, I had buried it back in the mud alongside the microchip's secrets. 3 days without food. Then, at the peak of a ridge, a weathered hut with a red mark on the door. I pushed it open and froze. The fox was someone I knew. Old Chief Secretary Kim Yo-jong's former personal chief of staff, missing for years, presumed dead, sat inside. Skeletal. Eyes burning with something between recognition and grief. "You made it, Jae-hee," he said, and smiled in a way that made my skin crawl. "You're here with Comrade Yo-jong's last gift." He held out a folded note with trembling hands. Kim Yo-jong's handwriting. I read it. "Jae-hee Uni, the moment that Chip leaves Pyongyang, your family disappears. But you need to live for this performance to be complete. Please, try to remain human." I couldn't tell if it was mercy or the cruelest threat I'd ever received. She had calculated my escape. Had factored it in, was using me even now as a piece on a board she was still playing. "Go," Cho said. "Every minute you wait, the river freezes tighter. The fox stays here and dies. You go and become the witness." I gripped the pen and ran. The Amok River's Chinese shore was close enough to see the lights barely. The moment my foot touched the bank, whistles cut through the dark from every direction. "Freeze. Move and we shoot." Searchlights. Dozens. The State Security Rapid Pursuit Unit had already taken the crossing. Rifle muzzles swung toward me. Behind me nothing but the edge of the world. "Fire. Leave no one alive." The shout came from behind as bullets shattered the ice surface of the Amok. The young guide running beside me cried out once and went down. Even as he fell, he shoved me forward. "Don't look back. Run." The improvised explosive he carried detonated under the pursuit squad's feet. I ran through the smoke, threw myself into the darkness on the Chinese side, and hit the ground gasping. The relief lasted maybe 10 minutes. On the night train through Dandong toward Shenyang, I felt a gaze tracking me from behind. Pyongyang's Storm Corps Rapid Pursuit Unit. They had followed my scent across the border like dogs and were sweeping the train cars one by one. I locked myself in a bathroom stall and watched through the mirror as men in black leather jackets moved methodically down the corridor. Every heartbeat was louder than the wheels. The isolation of a foreign country is sharper than any blade. No language, no one to trust, nothing in my hand but that silver pen. A broker I found in a Shenyang safe house looked at the pen and let his hunger show. "I know what's inside. Hand it over and I'll get you to South Korea clean. Or I sell you back to state security right now. Your call." My mind swayed. Just give it up. End the chase. But my grip tightened. This wasn't a bargaining chip. This was the last testament of people who had bled into the snow for me. I shoved through a window into the Shenyang night. Twisted ankle. Didn't stop. Behind me the sound of my door being kicked in. Nothing left to trust. Just 2 legs and the truth inside a pen. I ran south. Deeper into the dark. Toward whatever came next. The Laotian jungle was a living thing trying to kill me. Humidity that pressed into the lungs like a hand. Insects that found the gaps in every layer of clothing. Muddy water swallowed to stop the throat from closing. And underneath it all the sound of dry branches snapping behind me. The Storm Corps had followed me here. They moved like ghosts, tightening the radius with every hour. Every time I pressed against a tree to hide, I bit my lips bloody to keep my heartbeat from giving me away. Then the Mekong appeared. Thick fog hung over the water, blurring the line between river and sky. It looked like the border between worlds. The broker materialized from the mist, waving urgently from a small wooden boat. "Get in." No time. I stepped toward the boat and something cold pressed into my ribs. The pen. "Hand it over." His eyes had gone animal. He'd either been bought by state security or had figured out what the chip was worth. Either way, he wasn't the same man. He shoved me into the mud. We fought hand to hand, in the fog, on the riverbank. Fingernails torn back. Flesh scraped raw. My hand never released the pen. "You can't have it. This is my life." I drove my thumb into his eye and threw myself into the current. Behind me his scream and gunfire at the same instant. The cold water closed over my head. Fog swallowed all direction. Bullets punched white columns through the surface all around me. The pen dragged at me. Its weight pulled me down. I used it as a compass, instead held it like a reason and kicked. Lungs failing. Vision narrowing. And then, through the mist, a light. The Thai border. I reached toward it with the last of whatever I had left. The cold of the Mekong was erasing everything behind me, the blood, the ice, the names of the dead. And in my hand, still, the silver pen. Still there. Still mine. Seoul in spring is blinding. The lights. The laughter spilling from restaurants. It was nothing like Pyongyang's silence, and I didn't know what to do with that for a long time. The peace, when it came, was sometimes poison. I still wake in the night, gunshots that aren't there, the Mekong's smell that follows me into rooms. A dropped spoon in a restaurant and my heart is already running. The trauma is the permanent installment plan I pay for this freedom. At the National Intelligence Service, I placed the silver pen on the table and let it go. When the microchip was decoded, when Kim Yo-jong's secret financial networks and purge orders began to surface one by one, I watched her face on the screen and said it quietly, to no one in particular. Yo-jong, the pen you signed with came back. And it's pointed at you now. You thought erasing me would bury your secrets. But I lived and I became the record. Thinking about the cold that must have moved through her when she heard sitting in that polished Pyongyang office, something in my chest finally begins to loosen. This freedom isn't only mine. Lieutenant Colonel Park, who threw his body between me and death to buy me a few minutes. Old Cho, who sat in a frozen hut and waited to die so I could carry the truth forward. Without them, I would be a name no one remembers in a valley outside Pyongyang. What they handed me wasn't just intelligence. It was the cry of every person ground down under that system and a promise of the spring that will eventually reach the north. I don't run anymore. I carry the weight of what that pen meant heavier than the pen itself, and I choose to keep walking. The longing for the family I left behind, I'll turn it into something that lasts. Because this is what I know now, with everything I am, ruthless power cannot outlast the truth. The will to survive, in someone who has nothing left to lose, is stronger than any iron fist. Their choice to save me will not be wasted. From here, from Seoul, I will live loudly, fiercely, and completely. And I will write down every moment of your victory. I hope this story lights something in someone today. Thank you, from the bottom of my heart, for staying with me through all of it. If this reached you, subscribe, and leave a like. It means more than you